Welcome to another episode of the Strange Motion Way podcast. I am your host, Tim Strange, along with
Carrie Strange.
So hopefully you got last
week's
episode of ended up being part one of Zane Cullen, because imagine that. We all three talked way too much to put this in one episode, and we had a phone call in the middle, so it was just a good stopping point. So this is
part 2
of Zane Cullen from Cotati Speed Shop. Okay, we are back again.
So the Rod Powell story, make the phone call, and he ends up being just moved to our area from Salinas, and is interested in helping us with the logo. So it took a little while to get the logo done. I don't honestly remember what it cost. I'm sure it was cheap. Like any really good artist like Rod and from that era, didn't charge enough. We didn't have much of anything, so it was whatever it was a stretch for us. And this is all before digitizing and what everything is now. So it's like I have true hand-drawn logo artwork from Rod, a couple different variations of it, and then when we finalized the design, he hand painted this like 11 by 17 deal of the logo. I still have that. And that kind of led to a little bit of a friendship and working not a little bit, it definitely led to a great friendship, but we started working with Rod a little bit. We for us, it was a big deal that Rod was around, and we gave him access to the shop, and he would just come and do artwork. He would paint chairs and helmets and different things. He was kind of retired from cars at that point, and we'd been out there for a while, probably a couple of years at this point, because I want to say that Impala was done like 94, maybe 95, roughly. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really know anything about the car. I think we had a car we were getting ready for the show. Maybe it was earlier than that, because one of our, again, Oakland being local for us, we always put a lot of emphasis and energy to take a car to the Roadster show. Mm-hmm. And so that time of year was always a push for us. Like, if we're going to get something done, it's got to get done and go to the show. So we probably had our own project that we were finishing, and Rod gives us a call or comes by one day, in January, and says, "Hey, there's this car. They've run out of time. They got to drive all the way from Texas." And he kind of gives us the rundown on, it's a car that Jimmy Vaughn's been helping Mike Young with, and Gary, Gary's been doing all the work, and it's all painted. It was upholstered, pretty much assembled, but they just ran out of time on, cutting and polishing the car, detailing it and tidying up a couple of things, and they needed help. So Rod asked us if we could, and the car, again, back then the show setup day was Tuesday. I think the car showed up Monday afternoon from Texas. We recruited a friend, and me, Dennis, and the third person, we stayed up all night and cut and rubbed that car, detailed it, had it ready. They came and picked it up the next morning, because then you had to drive an hour to get to Oakland. They could have picked it up at 10 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock, I don't remember now. But everybody had to go down there because we had a car to set up to. And, so we played this really, really tiny role. But it was cool because it was, it was my introduction to Jimmy Vaughn and Gary Howard and Mike Young. Mm-hmm. And they showed, appreciation for what we did. And it was a really cool deal for us because, getting a car on the main floor at Oakland was a big, big deal. And it was, and at that point we had never had such a thing. We had cars that were there in different parts of the arena upstairs, or there was always another like back room, but not the main arena. And so to just be a small fraction and be there to be cleaning the car and helping all that on setup day was really cool for us. And then the car won the Barris Award at that show that year, when George was alive, and did really well at the show. And lo and behold, the car came back. And back then there was about 3 weeks between Oakland and Sacramento. And I guess they decided, somewhere throughout the weekend of Oakland, that the car should probably stay and go to Sacramento Autorama, big custom event. And so the car came back, and then it had a lot of little things, that just were done enough to be in the show, but really weren't done. And that's when Rod added the flames, so that the flames that were on the car were done at our shop. And, at that time we were just helping Rod out, and we were prepping and masking and, learning from Rod, while he was doing it. And, it's cool because I got pictures of Rod shooting it in the shop. Don't ask me where they are, but I know I got them. And, so fast forward to what you were talking about a little while ago. And I didn't know, but Rod had pictures of me polishing that car probably between Sacramento or Oakland and Sacramento. And I had never seen the photos. So at some point in that car's history, the flames were removed. And then,
at that time, the pictures that I seen, I think Mark posted them before it went to the Roadster show like 2 years ago.
So they the car came back to Salinas.
I'd like to mention an epic mustache that you had at that time. Yeah.
I tried growing one once in my life, and
it was epic. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried. It didn't really work out well. I kind of looked like a pirate. So it was pretty neat. The car comes back a couple years ago to Salinas, and, Rod's enlisted to put the flames back on it. And Mark and his group did a lot of work on the car to really kind of bring it back and do a few repairs. And they were able to do all that and get the car back to the Roadster show while Mike was still alive.
If some of you guys don't know, he has passed away. If you're a Mexican restaurant fan, Mike was one of the partners in the Chuy's Mexican restaurant chain. They're from Texas to Indianapolis to all over the middle part of the country. I don't know if they're in California.
No, they didn't have them.
There's three.
I was really oblivious to who Mike was and what Chuy's was and any of that stuff.
Well, we didn't learn that till probably
14 years ago.
We were in Tennessee when we learned it. But if you ever go to a Chuy's, there's a hubcap room that's got hubcaps and all this cool automotive art in the one room. And it's like, oh, it makes sense. It's custom guy who's been involved in this restaurant.
So during that kind of restoration process that Mark and Rod were doing recently, I guess Rod was reminiscing and pulling photos out, and they had photos out to try to make sure to get the flames right and all that too. And Mark was sending me some pictures that Rod had, and one of them was that one of me polishing the car. And, like I said, I was probably 23, 24 years old. And, you look back on that stuff, and we were grinding to just make it work and not making hardly anything. There were times where the bills got paid and we didn't. And, but man, I look back on it now and it's like, man, you wish you could have some of that back. And
see, that's one thing. A lot of people, I give credit to anybody, no matter what level they are, if they're running a hot rod restoration shop, because one, nobody understands it outside of our small little car world. My family still says some stuff sometimes that after 30 years, it's like, you ever going to get a real job? And I mean, just 3 weeks ago. And it's like, I always had trouble. Banks don't understand it. It's gotten better, but
it's funny. There's people that I've known 30 years and they're not car people, and you don't see them for a long time or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, you still messing around with that old car thing?
Yeah, I get that every time we go back home to Illinois. Yeah.
And then the next comment is like, huh. Yes, you either get it or you don't, whatever.
That's fine.
When you started young too, and being young and starting out at that time, it was different. There was a lot of people that didn't it was before television and internet and all these things where
God,
if you weren't around it, weren't exposed to it in any way, shape, or form, it was just the most foreign, alien thing to, you know. And it was definitely an underground thing, and that's probably what drew me to it. And I kind of
Can I tell my story about my parents? I'm going to tell this story. What? So the first time Zane knows this story, I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to censor it a little.
Came to Fresno?
Yeah, I got invited to Blackie's Fresno, and my Midwestern small town mom and dad. My mom sang in church every Sunday. Mom's no longer with us. It was a 20-minute conversation of me trying not to go to California. They're like, you don't need to go clear to California. There's plenty of car shows. There's Detroit, Louisville, Des Moines, Indianapolis. And I was like, it's okay. We had a 2-car hauler at that time, and we're going to haul another vehicle from a broker and get all our gas paid. So they finally said, okay, are we going to get canceled for this? My parents said, just be careful because there's gays out there and they rape people. That's what Midwestern farmers think of Northern California, you know, San Francisco in the movies. And
Zane and Andre.
Yeah, my mom
was like, oh, those two?
Yeah, Zane and Andre. And she's like, well, at least they're cute, she said. So, yeah, she met them at Detroit.
Yeah, Andre and I made a pretty good couple, but
you were a cute couple.
I'm still bummed that he got a goat or a cow named after him.
Yeah, she named a calf after him.
But it was an honor if my mom met somebody and named a cow. She named every calf that was born on the farm. But she did think Andre.
I didn't make the cut on that one.
You were. There was a Zane eventually.
I don't know.
But I remember the Andre one because my mom just outright asked Andre if he was gay.
And there's nothing.
And I remember
wrong
we
with
were in the elevator.
we don't
and
care.
He was just so sweet to my mom. Mrs. Strange, it's not the first time, but no, I am not. I think it's the Northern California way of life, and
that was the first time I'd ever gone to Detroit. That was a lot of fun.
That was a hoot.
But the kicker was she named this calf Andre.
Yeah.
Well, as the weather got better, they got back up to the cow and gave it its injections and shots and stuff. It ended up being a female. It was a heifer. It was not.
And she thought that was.
And she stuck it.
Funniest.
She just laughed
ever.
And laughed. So yeah, Andre was a heifer.
Yeah. Like I knew he was gay.
And if you are, it's okay.
Yeah.
You're equal opportunity.
That's just what Midwest farmers think of.
Many years ago, before society made us change.
Yeah. Okay. Where were we before I had to tell my California story?
Yeah, I don't know. We were talking about.
Yeah.
So let's get into some of the cars here. We have talked for 2 hours already, Zane.
I knew you guys would do this.
Yeah.
You guys talk on the phone every day for hours. But it's good. We're getting your story out there.
So we talked about the Dick Long cars getting in magazines. What were some of your? We can't talk about all the cars. Some of your heavy hitters. What were the Slonaker cars that won the Slonaker?
Rich's Corvette.
Is it going to be on display there this year?
It actually got invited to be back at the show for the 75th, so it's going to be in Building 9 with the Amber winners. So I think that might have been the first one, and then I won it with the gold car.
Oh, and, I guess I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's why I always say 2 or 3 because I think it's just those 2. The Bertolucci I think is 3 because the Bertolucci I know we won it with Dick's 37, Dick's 50 Ols, and then John Thompson won it with his 36 Roadster. So I think that's the order. So the Slonaker was Stadelhofer's Vet and my gold 32.
So your gold 32.
They can't see this.
Yeah, I came out. I don't know. I think this was the first time I ever came out and helped. I helped during the day on the Black Trans Am.
Yeah, that was.
And then we worked on your car some at night.
Yeah.
So here is, and it's board track styled. You call it a 32, but it's kind of not really a 32 other than the shell.
And the rails.
Yeah.
It's 32 rails, 32 grill shell, and then it's just kind of board track era body.
I don't know why they didn't use the big picture with the exhaust down the side. So it had exhaust down the side. And talk about the drivetrain in that thing.
It was at the time, a modern 4-cylinder, kind of like it was a Ford PZEV motor. They were used in Ford Focus and Ranger pickups.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, it was a new crate motor thing, and I had a Ranger 5-speed behind it, and then with the help of my good friend Jim Foley up in Nevada, he really did a number on the motor and did a Hillborn, like a side draft Hillborn injection that was EFI'd on it, and really made that motor look like a piece of jewelry. And it was really kind of a big part of what that car needed for the look.
And then it ended up being that same year, Hot Rod Magazine top 10 cars of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's to this day was probably, when people ask you like what your favorite car or the most fun car, that probably was so far the car, just because there were no boundaries. I didn't have anybody to tell me what they wanted done, or what they think they wanted, or predetermined color or anything like that.
Because as builders, we can only do what the customer wants. Yes, sometimes we get entrusted to do kind of what we wanted. My favorite car I've built was the Hanson Buick, because they really let me throw my ideas at it.
Right.
And of course, a couple of the cars I built for myself, but I never have the money to quite finish cars for myself to the level that I want to. And a lot of people that don't do this for a living don't understand that we still have to build the car where the customer's writing the check for.
Yeah. And so that for me was a really first time opportunity to build something with no constraints. Take something that was in my head, and take a lot of ideas and narrow them down to that car.
Mm-hmm.
And
what you're saying is, on this car, you were not under restriction.
Yes,
Carrie's paying attention.
Yeah. No restriction there. I got on restriction after, though. But no, that was for me a lot of fun, because I could do what I wanted in my head, and it was cool because at the time I was kind of criticized a little bit, like, oh, why would you want to build another 32? They're everywhere. And it was cool. I got to work with my friend Keith Tardell. Keith actually did most all the work on the chassis and the setup, and then again work with Jim, who we had done projects with and had become friends with, and he helped me with my project. And Sid Shavers, who had done a lot of customer cars, did the interior for me. And then at the time, everybody with the shop would help out a little here, a little there. People would give a hand where needed, or do a little trade work with some of the guys to get some help. And you were out helping with the Trans Am at the time, so I had your help at nights with it. And kind of also criticized, I didn't know what color I wanted to paint it for a while, and when I kind of finally figured it out, Mike Chase happened to ask me, and and that car was I guess almost 20 years ago at this point, and Mike Chase,
this was 2005.
Yeah, so he remembers it crystal clear. And Mike asked me what color I was going to paint it, and I told him, and he literally drove over that afternoon, was dead serious, and he was like, you cannot paint this car gold, and gave me this whole reasoning why and what it should be. And I listened, because I've always, Mike's an influence guy, knows his shit on hot rods, and and is a dear friend, and I listened to everything he said, and I just said, thanks, Mike, but it's going to get painted gold.
What color did Mike think it should be?
He thought I should paint it like racing green, like a British racing green, or a forest green, or a green from the 30s era. And
it would have worked that. But
I love that color too, but I knew what I wanted.
It pops good with that color. It really pops.
So
and pictures don't do that color. Just in person, it's crazy. Yeah. Do you know where that car is now?
It actually, as far as I know, it resides in a museum in Florida, and I don't know the official name of it, but Lee Munder bought it when I sold it at the RM auction. and his collection I thought was private, and I think it was private for a number of years. But I was recently talking with Eric Geisert, and then that on the phone conversation, I got on the computer to kind of look around, and it came up, and there's actually photos of the Munder collection. As far as I know, you can visit their museum. So as far as I know, it's still there.
What part of Florida is it in?
Now you're kind of breaking up.
What part of Florida is it in?
Oh man,
I'll try to look it up because I got to go to Florida in a couple months for an event. Maybe I'll have to see if it's close so I can go look at it.
I'm going to apologize now from anybody from Florida or the East Coast, but it's like Boca Raton or something like that.
Boca Raton?
There you go.
I think that's further south than where I'm going.
So
okay.
Yeah, I guess it's. I never been called about it, or it's just. I was told at one point somebody that knew or knows Lee that it was in his office somewhere up in the East Coast, and then I think I had heard he had a collection in Florida at the time that it was sold. And then as far as what I saw on the internet, it now resides there in that collection. So cool. Yeah, just that car, we built it in a really short time frame with everybody's help for that matter. And then
you debuted at the 2004 SEMA show, which happened to be the same year you got the Good Guys Trendsetter. Contrary to popular belief, the Trendsetter isn't for one certain car. It's mostly youngish based, and it's for your work up to that point, and they think you're going to keep doing great things in the future. Sometimes they've got it wrong because we got the Trendsetter back there.
Yeah, and
I do great things.
Obviously, we had done enough work up to that point. I think that's what we were kind of acknowledged for, being young. Done a fair amount of work at that point.
So you think you got? Well, yeah, you got it.
I had no idea about the Trendsetter. I was just trying to build the car.
Yeah.
And then we talked about, well, maybe it'd be great to debut it at SEMA. And there were a couple times where I was about ready to throw in the towel. And Jim Dalton from Buckaroo at the time, Jim was always calling me, hey, how's the car going? Had kind of a little handful of people like Jim calling me, and I'm like, man, I don't think it's going to make it. And cause I think I didn't really have a spot for the car, but through Jim and John Diana at Buckaroo and stuff, they kind of had something sorted out. So the car was a feature car or whatever. And I was telling Jim, I don't think the car is going to make it, man. I'm just, I'm pushing hard. And he's like, nah, just keep doing what you're going to do. You're going to make it. And I'm like, it was down like one of those don't sleep for 2 days beforehand and you're working up to the last minute, load it in the trailer. And I think, I'm trying to remember.
I don't think it was running that by then because I helped push it in.
It was like ready to fire, but we hadn't test fired it yet. And
which I've taken a lot of pushers. SEMA is not a driving event.
It was so down. Like we were one of the, I think I pushed it in position 2 hours, at like 5 o'clock in the morning, the day that the show opened. It was that down to the wire. And I was like, I'm trying to remember, I think Pryor and my dad went with me because I hadn't slept in a couple of days.
I'm pretty sure Pryor was with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Darren and a couple of other people flew out.
So the Trendsetters up to that point was the first guy to ever get it was Chip Foose, and then Alan Johnson, and then Troy Trepanier was second, and then Alan Johnson, and then Eric Pratt, and then I got it, and I think Dave Lane got it the year before you.
Okay.
And so that's pretty good company to be in right there.
It is.
Yeah, I knew about it. I understood what it was, but really I was so focused on the car, getting it done, thinking I had to be there for SEMA and almost trying to get out of it. And then, I think Jim was kind of telling me like, oh yeah, well, the spots moved. They're going to put you outside. And I'm like, no, I can't. Sometimes it rains. I don't want to be outside. And no, don't worry about it. There's going to be a tent. And he was starting to lie through his teeth to me on what it was. And then, I show up and we're in it, that's how I met Mike and Jim Ring, because they had one of their early cars there that year. And, and it's funny that the three of us named it Dumpster Alley. And it was when they parked those 8 cars, like this, the banquet
Mhm.
cars were parked between where you walk out of the hotel and into the convention center. And it was great. Obviously there was a lot of foot traffic, so tons of people saw the cars. But we were like, what's going on here? We're like, there was literally garbage trucks emptying dumpsters and shit. And so, yeah. And then, they didn't tell me shit. I didn't know anything about the award. And we go to the banquet because I knew the car was going into the banquet at that point. So we have to push the car, from around the building and into the banquet room there. And, they got the whole thing going on, and all of a sudden they start talking about the shop and all that. And there we go. We won the Trendsetter. And
yeah, we didn't know ahead of time when we won it. Now they let them know to make sure they're there, because not everybody goes to the banquet every year. So like, Tyler,
I was probably the most stressful scenario that created that, being that I got there, an hour or two before people are actually going into the convention center. So yeah, I look back on it. It was tremendous fun. Looking back on it, it was hell at the time, but but yeah, that car was important to me in a lot of ways, just because I got to do things with it that nobody was telling me what they needed or wanted done. And again, another one of those projects that did well. The Slonaker was a big surprise, and the car it had a lot of neat things happen to it. And it kind of became at the time, it was a neat crossover where you had really, hardcore traditional hot rod guys. And then, there's when we started, it was pre-48, and then there was customs. There were distinctive hot rod and customs, and all the other stuff was just weird. And now, all the boundaries are all over the place. There's no rules. It's great. But that was the car was it was cool to have it done, have the idea out there, and these really traditional type guys come over to say, man, this is the best car here. And guys young and old and all that. So it was very solidifying to see the idea of it come to fruition, of it's another 32 Ford, but there's a lot you can still do with the 32 Ford that hasn't been done yet if you can think outside the box.
You would still be totally happy if you could still just be building 32 registers all the time, couldn't you?
Yeah, I am messed up that way. Yeah.
Big early Fords is what you would be happy just building, early Fords.
Yeah.
So what cars did you win the Bertolucci Award at Sacramento with?
I think the first one was.
Did we talk about that?
Well, I mentioned it earlier, but I think the first one was Dick's 37 Cabriolet. The second one was Dick and Cindy's 50 Ols, which same owner, but 2 different cars. And then the last one, which was quite a while ago, John Thompson's 36 Roadster.
Okay. Very cool.
So, yeah.
What year were you the Grand National Roadster Show Builder of the Year?
I think it was 2003. I think it was before the Trendsetter. Yeah, I know.
So like 10 years.
It was 2002 or 2003.
Like 10 years into your career, you were Builder of the Year at the Roadster Show.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Awesome. That's crazy to think about that.
Yeah, I don't really think about it, to be honest with you. And you bring that crap up, and it still just makes me
feel
old. I don't have words for it. I mean, if you would have asked me when we started, at the age that we started, where you would be, as this stuff has happened, I would have never thought of. I mean,
one of my goals was, when I started a hot rod shop, 1, I wanted to get a car and a magazine. And 2, in my mind, I wanted to buy a better quality of peanut butter and maybe that next upper shelf of frozen pizza.
Well,
because You still don't
I'm
build
gonna
hot rods to get rich.
I'm going to disagree. Your first goal was probably to be on TV before anybody knew there was TV.
No, I never really. Even when the TV was offered to me, I didn't have a plan in it.
Joking with you, dude.
Yeah. I mean, look at this face. Do you think they'd ever
He's
put
got a
something like
face
this?
for radio.
I have
wait.
exactly.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean
Love you too, honey.
So
Were you on
yeah,
TV?
Nope. I have a face for radio too.
Zane, speaking of TV, one of Zane's hashtags that he uses sometimes on social media is not seen on TV.
Wait, Zane does social media?
And trailers full of unicorns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're down with the unicorns.
Yeah. So
were you good in school when you were not on restriction? What was your were you good in like writing and like, because you do an article now for a magazine?
Oh, that's right. He writes the monthly.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Paint tips with Zane. Contrary to popular belief, he does use that in the hashtag sometimes.
Just a tip?
On Instagram, he calls it just a tip with Zane. Good guy has vetoed that and says, no, you can't use that. But yeah, how many years you been doing the paint tip articles now?
Oh, man.
Long time.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I want to say it must be 2016 or 17, maybe.
Yeah. Are you having trouble coming up with new stuff to write about?
What's that?
Are you having trouble coming up with new stuff to write about? Because you'll do some bodywork stuff or Bondo or fixing cracks or doing flames, and you'll do like you did a surfboard or a skateboard one time. So it's like, oh, I'm going to show how to do flames and fades. Do you struggle from month to month trying to find something, or does it just come natural?
No, there's definitely struggles. I mean, we'll get a run where I'll just bam, bam, bam. I got 3 or 4 things going on that like, oh, those would be great for an article. And I can kind of get ahead with the information. And then sometimes, as you know, the projects are just taking a while to get to the next stage. And I'm like, man, we just did that recently and I can't do that. So I got to come up with an idea, and then, we'll, kind of fabricate or stage the information for the photos. But the information is obviously real. We just got to kind of create it. It isn't always so natural on something that's going on in the shop. But yeah, I know sometimes it's tough. I think the toughest part even still is to take the things that really well and have learned all these different little things. And that's the cool part too of like, there's a lot of guys in our age group where I can get on the phone with you and ask a question. Daryl Hollenbeck, Dave Tucci, Charlie Hutton, younger guys, Joe Capani. I mean, there's just so much great information out there now. I can call a guy like, hey, what are you using for a product? What do you do in this situation? And all those things that are like, because you do it every day. The hardest part for me is to try to extract the simplest of things in there for the sake of the article. And that's because that was really the premise of it was, try to take the simplest trick or tip that would help somebody at home who's trying to figure this stuff out or understand, when you're supposed to go from, 80 grit to 1,000 grit, like they don't know the sequences of those things. And so all of that, we try to pull different things out of. And just actually recently, an upcoming one was a friend of mine bought some primer from Squeege. And he was doing an engine and heads and some stuff for one of his hot rods. And he's calling me to tell me about the product, ask me a couple questions. And he gets, everything masked off because, on an engine, there's critical areas you don't want to paint. And yeah, we talk about the product and stuff and some prep tips and stuff for him. And then about a month goes by and he calls me. He's like, dude, it's like getting the masking tape and paper off of this I'm like, oh man, I didn't even think to tell you to untape it right away because, high build primer, it bridges over the tape and does weird stuff to the tape. And I felt like a jerk for not letting him know about it. And I'm like, that's an article right there. I need to, and I I didn't have anything. So I chopped up some pieces of metal, and we kind of created a situation where we were doing some priming, but it wasn't that type of thing. And then put some tape down and put the primer over it heavy, and then showed, the result of why you want to unmask fairly quickly or not, and not wait. And so it's stuff like that. And, just that casual conversation led to an idea for an article. So everything from any like bare metal prep, any of the bodywork stages, paint process, paint prepping, polishing, even a little bit of detailing, and sometimes just shop stuff, tools needed, clean air. I mean, anything that is, and there's a big realm of stuff that happens in the auto body and paint process.
Do you think if your English teacher learned that you were writing an article every month for a national publication that she would believe it?
No way in hell.
Yeah. Yeah. My English teacher, I talked about that the other day. It's like, yeah.
Well, I mean, luckily I got, there's good support people around you. I had John Drummond for a number of years when he was at the Good Guys, and he'd kind of always check me over and give me a hand. And, now I got Damon Lee, and Damon and I have got a great process. He's incredibly helpful to, when I did tech with stuff way back when he was at Rod and Custom and some of the other magazines. So, man, Damon and I have known each other probably 25 plus years now. So, and we always just kind of hit it off, and he's a sharp dude, and he's a do-it-yourselfer. So he'd come up and spend a couple of 2 or 3 days, when he was based in SoCal, and we would, have a half a dozen things that we'd bang out for tech for him. So, now with his help, it's like seamless, and he really helps me get it stripped down and streamlines the information. So, kind of like here at the shop, you got to have good people around you, and to make it all happen.
Yeah. You got Darren that's been there for years with you. I call him the dream crusher, because whenever, I don't know if some of you guys have seen Zane's shop, Cotati, the stuff that they put out. If it ain't perfect, it ain't going out. So I'm lucky to know a lot of people and go to a lot of places and see a lot of cars. So there's top painters in the country: Zane's shop, Randy from the Paint House, Capani, am I saying it right? Capani Color guys. Of course, Daryl Hollenbeck, Scott Banowski. I was thinking of somebody on the East Coast earlier when I was thinking about this, and now I'm blank. Of course, Charlie Hutton. I mean, there's some incredible painters in the industry. Yeah, and if this is the first time of you hearing about Zane Cullen, you've seen his stuff in the magazine. And so the last time I came out and helped, we'll talk about some of the more modern cars here, because we're running. Zane wants to set a record for be our longest interview yet.
He's going to do it.
But this was the last one I came out and helped on. Great couple from San Francisco. Great car. That was the last car you took to SEMA. And this one, when I seen you at SEMA, I was really worried about you, because it was like, I left because I was taking a car to SEMA, wasn't it? Or did I just, no, I wasn't doing a car for SEMA then, but I came home to work. And then before I went, and it was like 2.5 weeks before SEMA, and the car wasn't painted yet. I was working on the rear apron and fitting the tail light or the exhaust in it, and get a cool unveiling in the Covercraft booth.
Yep.
The Hemmings guys did a lot of stuff with it, and it was very cool. Great family, great couple of that. So before we talk about,
was that that was the last time you were out, or was that when we were doing the McLaren race car?
Oh, I did come out on the McLaren race car.
I thought that was all. I don't remember which one was before the other.
I thought it was the same time.
Well,
it could have been that too. Yeah.
The last time you went out there was it was in August, because it was when we took the 32 to. You were there at Zane's in August before we took the 32 to Pleasanton. What were you working on?
I think I was there one time. I think this was after that, when I had Hanson's car shipped.
Yeah, that was after.
Okay.
So I want to talk about something else not car related here.
I know what you're going to say.
You know,
I do.
we'll talk about his kids.
I know that's exactly what you're gonna say.
So talk about you got two awesome kids. I love them. They say they love me too. They're not quite right. So the first time I'm going to tell this story that I came and I stayed at your house.
That was
because I know it's hard to believe, but Zane lets these random dudes stay and share bunk beds with his boy. So it's just a weird thing. But they're little at the time. Kayla and Taylor.
That was your very first time out?
When I had the nightmare was the first time out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the same trip with Taylor to Target?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, it might have been. I wasn't going to say that.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell the Target story.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about that.
No, I
sleep. We'll spare Taylor
so this
on
is
that one.
my nightmare story.
But if you ever see us in person, ask us about that.
We've got
Taylor
the
story.
funniest, Taylor story.
The nightmare story is my daughter. The Target story is my son.
Yeah. Yes. So the nightmare story, I sleep with the TV on because I have the crazy ear ringing. And so I didn't want to sleep. I was like, I'll just sleep on the couch. It's a big, comfortable couch. So like, okay, that's weird. You sleep with the TV on. So anyway, I got TV on. I still blame Steph for scaring me with a clown or something earlier in the day. Or what's his name? AJ worked there then, and he would scare me with a clown during the day. Anyway, in the middle of the night, I wake up. I'm screaming.
It was loud. It woke me up.
Upstairs.
Yeah. It was loud.
He's a screamer.
And the next morning, the bathroom I used was the kids' bathroom. You go upstairs, and across the door was Kayla's room. And Kayla's probably, 7, 8 at this time?
Yeah, she's pretty young.
And she comes to the door. It was just as creepy. And her hair is all wild. And she comes to the door because obviously she heard me scream too. And goes.
He tells me that, she's hovering.
I swear she hovered.
She's like hovering.
Yeah, she's like, I told you shouldn't sleep with the TV on. The poltergeists are going to get you. And it's like, I swear she hovered back into the room, like just walked backwards into the darkness. And I'm like, well, that was creepy. No wonder I have a nightmare in this. And then we got to telling that story. And then we told the story before at SEMA. And Zane always gets crying and laughing. But yeah, I screamed like a little girl on Zane's couch the very first time I come out. And he's let me come out since. But yeah, there's been a lot of people had shared rooms with your boy. It's like you're very trusting. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Clay Cook used to sleep in there, and a lot of people have stared in the bunk beds. I don't fit in a bunk bed very well, but
we have just a regular, modest house, so there isn't guest rooms or anything. And Steph has been incredibly kind and giving to let me have people over in times of need and stuff like that. And what's that?
You get to have friends over.
Yeah, I get to have friends over, but
there's also stories. I listen to the Chris Coddington podcast often, and same thing happened at Boyd's. They had a spare bedroom, and Bobby Alloway stayed for a while, and Bob Bowder stayed for a while, and that's just
that's what car guys do.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm gonna say when I have stayed at your house and Steph has been home, my back has never been cleaner.
Poor Steph. I'm sorry.
She's
Steph.
not going to listen to this, is she? No.
I'll take that little clip out. I'll do a social media post on it.
Yeah. So let's talk about your kids, of the things that they have done. I think they've got a pretty good story too, briefly, and what they've accomplished.
Yeah. So I'll start with Taylor since he's the older one. He just last August, so just a recent few months, finished up his master's degree, got married, and is working full-time as a sports strength coach at UC San Diego. And, I mean, you know him, you've known him a long time. Was always a baseball fanatic. Same thing, he started out doing really good in school young, and then kind of got into a really bad lazy stage and didn't do well for a number of years, just did barely enough to be able to play through high school and stuff, and ended up playing at the junior college level here. But it's probably one of the best things that ever happened to him. We have a incredible local program here at the Santa Rosa JC. And it really changed him and his thinking and his commitment to things. And and he did well there, and that helped him get a baseball scholarship to a private school university for his last 2 years. And same thing, he kind of took that mindset to that school and did really well, and broke some school records for some things even outside of baseball, and that's kind of snowballed into him starting his masters. And
Then he actually got to go to spring training. You guys went to Texas one year too.
no, so what happened was when he finished college, he had kind of a weird career path. I mean, the kid that hated school, I think, was in college for 8 years total.
Well, that was
because-
also during COVID time, and there was a whole bunch of
exactly.
weirdness.
So,
And,
like the junior college program, the baseball program is so sought after at our junior college. I mean, kids come from Hawaii, different states. It's a measure to even make that squad. And he made it his first year, but I think they call it gray shirting. So he's made the team, but there's no way in hell he'll play. So he goes to school, he goes to all the practices, does all the workouts, has to be there for home games, but doesn't travel and doesn't play. Second year, he starts playing and gets a little bit of play time and does pretty good. And then his last year at the JC, he was a starter. And when he started there, the team had just come off state championship. They had of 90-something junior colleges in California, they won state. I think his first year there, he gray shirted. They returned back to state and maybe lost or maybe almost got there. I don't remember now. And they did really well his 2 years, but just didn't have the formula to get there. But individually, it got him to the next level. But when he went to Jamestown, North Dakota, Jamestown University, it was really well. It went really well. But then COVID hit, so they didn't play a year, but he didn't lose eligibility. So it really kind of helped him out with schooling, and then still got to finish out. Graduated as he was finishing baseball, and because of that longer path, he was just a little bit on the older side at that point. Having I think 6 years of college at that point. And but the way they finished, and he finished so strong that he got a really nice letter from the Boston Red Sox, and they had a pre-draft workout for a couple of days in Houston. I think it was in Dallas, excuse me. And he got to go out there for a couple of days, and ultimately, I think that was really the end of it. But I think for him, it led better things. He was able to stay in Jamestown and participate in the master's program that they kind of offered him, and it was a really neat deal. It's a smaller school, so there's not as many positions, and there was only 2 or 3 grad assistant programs, and good timing and some moving pieces, he was able to slide into that position, which he then was working for the school in their strength and conditioning program as a coach. But in return, that was paying for his master's. And so,
and I can say his mustache growing is better than yours was.
Much, much better. Yeah. And he doesn't, his hair is a little different color, so he doesn't really pull off the pirate look like I did, but but it's working for him, I guess.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's they're living down in the San Diego area. He's now married, a couple of dogs, married a girl, Sarah, who he met just before he left, and great lady, and they're good together. And then Kayla is about a year and a half younger than Taylor, and she actually ended up in SoCal first. She, right out of high school, went to kind of a beauty and design school down there, and her area of interest was cosmetics and wanted to kind of get into the business and marketing side of cosmetics, and kind of like trade school for that industry. And she's been down there since, and kind of quickly got into a job, and I remember in high school her telling me that would be like her dream job. So right out of school, she kind of got to work for a company, and she stayed there for a couple of years. And of course, mom and dad wanted her to stay.
And if you don't want to mention that, I'm just going to say Huge company.
Yeah,
Absolutely huge.
In that industry. I know she has to sign like a lot of things that
Mhm.
she can't talk about, so I'll leave it pretty vague. Um, but she ended up leaving the company, and we wanted her to stay because it was a really good gig and financially. And but I think her leaving gave her a chance to grow. She stayed in the industry, but learned some other aspects. And as you know, especially like with what we do, being on the job is where you learn the most. And she's kind of morphed into this almost like photographer now, and she kind of developed a style for something that her former employer she was doing kind of like side work or independent contract work for him, and they kind of saw what she was doing and requested that she's now there on all of the shoots, and it's kind of gone into some other things. And she just recently did something on a much bigger level where they have her on set doing specific stuff, that's really kind of photo and video based. And she's doing all of her post production editing. And she's just it's neat to hear because it's a world that I don't totally understand. But I have female friends and stuff that are into cosmetics and all those things. And
So you're saying you don't wear makeup?
well,
Not all the time.
I have it on for camera now today. Yes.
Okay.
Normally,
Okay.
no.
Perfect.
But friends that I know will compliment, like, oh, I really like what Kayla did with this photo and the style she has. It's really cool to hear. And she's just turned 25, so she's
Wow.
and she's she's
You guys are old.
she's in that grind now. She's got to push and kick and keep developing her craft. And but I know she's really enjoying it. And she probably wouldn't ever admit it, but I think she likes being down there. It's just it's a cool
I checked
area.
on her. I messaged you because while this is being recorded, LA's half on fire right now. And I messaged you, and the other day I actually messaged Kayla and checked on her, and she says, I'm good where I'm at. And she thanked me for checking in. So of all the stuff, if you're never remembered for your car stuff, you've raised a couple slightly screwed up mentally kids that I really love. They've got great sense of humor. They've got great passion for what they do. And like, again, staying in his room, sometimes he'd go stay someplace else when I was home because I don't know. I don't know if because I sleep naked or what, but and your guys' motivational whiteboard on there of for his training and all of that stuff was always pretty cool to see. I'd always write something on there being a smart ass, and Steph would erase it the next day or after or it wasn't there the next time I came. And so we need to start wrapping this up here. We can always do a part 2. So what are you working on now that you can talk about? I know there's a couple cars kind of private that might be going for some big awards. So we don't not talk about them. So let's talk about anything you can talk about there, and your product lines, the 2 product lines that you got.
Currently in the shop, we got some really cool projects. It's definitely a higher percentage of the cars that I'm personally interested in. We got a really cool 35.3 window behind me.
Is that the one for New Zealand?
Yeah.
And that's what we talked about. Yours will air before it hit Greg's will. And I remember seeing that you showed me that there's a book of stuff that you have to do on that car to go into New Zealand for it to pass their inspection, like brake line clamps every 12 inches. There's just a bunch of weird little extra safety.
It's not weird. It's intelligent, and it's like
Are you saying that other countries are smarter than ours?
Let me put it to you this way. It's interesting to me. It's a really good book. It's not scripture. I know that they update it. They're an evolving thing, but to have a legislative body, I think it's called the LVVTA. I'd have to look. It's been a while since I don't really remember it. But anyways, to have a form of their government put rules and regulation on what you can do on a hot rod or how it should be done and have to be inspected,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty cool. When I look at as a comparison, I'll go ahead and take the credit as a U.S. citizen, born and raised here, that this is the birthplace of hot rodding, and it's
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. But when you look at other countries, and when in the hot rodding culture that they're interested in, it's Americana. And to have a country all the way around the world like New Zealand, who's created such a mandatory situation for the safety of their people, how cars should be built, and we're from the birthplace, and it's still cowboys and Indians here. I don't. It blows my mind. It's, I see things in the book like, there's probably a better way to do it, but I gotta, credit them for having that and pushing for it, and always pushing for it to be better. It just makes the industry better, or at least anything that's entering their country better. You know, there's a lot of elements like that I think that we should have here. But that's a much bigger situation than me by myself. And it just, just all I can do is my best effort every day. Right.
Yeah.
I got my problems to worry about. I can't worry about everybody else's.
Yeah.
So that car's from New Zealand. It's kind of a neat traditional custom with a little twist here and there to it. So I'm excited about that one because it's a kind of an era car I love. Got a 39 Zephyr that's going to be outrageous, traditional but not traditional looking. A lot of extensive effort put into it for things that'll really go unnoticed, but that's just the nature of it. Very subtle type car, a really radical 41 Willys steel coupe. I actually have a couple of early roadsters going right now. Finishing up a couple of what I call late model. We got a couple of early 60s cars we're finishing up. One's a 67 Camaro convertible. The other's a 66 Impala. It's been kind of a long-term project, but it's finally going to see the light of day. It's pretty neat. And the cool part is we did a lot of work a number of years ago on it, and makes
that
me feel
car actually has a little bit of metal work. From time to time, you would bring out the great Clay Cook to do like a class for your shop guys and make some parts. There's a couple pieces on that car that Clay Cook helped fabricate.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about it is the changes and the styling and stuff that we've done to the car. Even though it went on hold for a little while, it's a timeless piece. There isn't anything that we did that I wish we would have done differently or looks dated. It's pretty authentic car. It's going to be nice. So, but that's going to kind of be it for some late model stuff. We got a lot of good early stuff going, and that's what I'm excited about. And that's always been my area of interest, but I'm not always in control of what we get to work on because there's, bills to pay. And I'm grateful that, through all of this, we've always been able to do quality stuff, and people want that from us. But at this point, and I'm kind of taking the steering wheel a little bit on putting more emphasis on the cars, working on the cars that really get me excited and kind of what got me started in all of this. And and as we talked about earlier, the Oakland Roadster Show, the Grand National Roadster Show, it's a big part of what we've always done. And those, the early days, that's what that stuff was early hot rods and, traditional customs. And, again, it's just the stuff that always made me tick, and, but it isn't always what you get to work on. So,
yeah. So let's talk about the products that you offer through the shop.
Well, there's not a lot. We have a windshield for 32 Roadsters that we did a number of years ago, probably close to 20 years ago. We did a run. We probably sold about 30 to 40 of them over the year. And then it kind of went through a weird state where we couldn't get them, and our patterns almost kind of got lost and destroyed, and whole nother story that it probably don't need to get into right now. But luckily, with the help of some friends in the Northwest and some Canadian hot rod guys, it's back. Really thanks to Scott Booth and his shop up there. And Scott also is part of the SoCal Speed Shop franchise. He has SoCal Canada. And he's also responsible for, maintaining the patterns and getting the castings done for the SoCal windshields. Scott owns the Duval side of it, and Scott's doing the Duvals again. And he's helping us with ours. So Scott's kind of in a way, he's our age, but he's an important piece in all of this because he gets the history. He loves the tradition of all of this, and he doesn't want to see some of this great stuff go. So luckily, we were able to bring our windshield back with Scott's help.
Explain to people if they've never seen your windshield frame what it is.
It's kind of a cross. It looks like a SoCal in a way, but it's got differences. Ours has a curved piece of glass in it rather than flat. And it evolved too. It was always had a curved top that kind of swept with the lower portion of the casting, the part that mounts to the cowl. And then we later did a more flatter version on top, which is a little bit more traditional looking to me. It looks good with like a removable top or a folding top of some sort. Just makes the header a little bit more classic looking. So there's two versions of that, again, like I said, we just got the first few in last week. So I'll be able to have them on display at the Roadster Show and offer them again. And there's some other small products we've been working on, a line of clamps, both hard and soft line clamps. It's really simple, but it's got a nice theme and it carries the same look from, a 3/16 all the way up to a 5/8 line, and a few line and hose separators. Everything's just kind of designed to work together. We've had great clamps available for a long time, but it's, a certain clamps from these guys and certain clamps from those guys. And that's something that always kind of bothered me. I wanted more kind of continuity and just a simple thing like a clamp. So we've been working on that for a while. We've been able to integrate that into some of our builds in the last couple of years and just kind of been holding back to bring it out. So, we'll have a form of that at the show, and kind of been working on a brake component to go with an existing brake kit that's a very traditional looking hot rod brake kit, but it's more on the disc brake side of things, not the hidden disc or the drum look. It's a true disc brake, very late 50s, early 60s looking. So that's a few of the things that we've been working on here internally. And then about a year ago, kind of a weird circumstance fell in our lap. And to kind of sum it up and make it simple, we kind of got the ability to be and have the stewardship of the Dan Fink Metalworks company. And it really kind of happened with a need for some parts that they offered for a long time. And I didn't know this at the time, but there was kind of a split at the company years ago where Dan Fink Grills was separate from Dan Fink Metalworks. And the guys that took over the Dan Fink Grill side, maybe 7-8 years ago, I thought that they were doing the whole thing. And he moved. I reached out to him, and the stuff that I needed, he said, "Oh no, you'd probably get a hold of John West." And I've known John for years. I met John through Larry Erickson, and so I reached out to John, and hey, I need some of these hood kits and stuff. And one thing led to another, and John's like, "Why don't you just take this over?" And he kind of made it an irresistible offer, and so it took a little while to kind of put that together. And I just wanted some hood kits, and one thing led to another. And I stopped by to see John on the way home from visiting our son down south, and just to get an idea of some of the hood stuff and all the product he said that was there. And I knew there was some things missing we had to work on together to get happening. And he starts, "Oh yeah, and the Dan Fink this is there and blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." I thought was kind of talking about the hood kits. And so a little time went by and we were on the phone, and I said, "Hey, John, when I was down there, you mentioned about the Dan Fink, 32, 3 and 4 windshield post. And Roadster windshield stuff that Dan Fink did. And I had forgotten all about that. And he's like, yeah, it's all yours. Get it out of here. It's all yours. And I was like, right on, man. That's a bonus. That's my jam. I like Roadsters, you know? And so anyways, we was a needed product. We got that together. We went down earlier last year and spent a day with John and a guy that worked for Dan for years who still helps John out on stuff. And we kind of went through, you know, the kit building process for the hood hinges and because there's a lot of bits and pieces to make it all happen. And, you know, and again, this is stuff that goes back way before we got started in this. And I kind of look at Dan Fink Metalworks as kind of a legacy brand in our industry. And, you know, and it's you know, I've worked with those hood kits for years and some other ones, and I always thought Dan's were one of the best. And so to be able to kind of take that over and you know, bring it back out for people, and, you know, especially if you got an early Ford and make and kind of start to make some changes on it too. There's a few things that I always wanted to do and use it in a couple of different ways. And we're not quite there yet. You know, right now we're really just kind of broke the ground on, you know, being able to make the kits and know that they work and kind of make them for generations for Model A, 32, 3 and 4. You know, the early stuff.
Are you going to have some of these on display at the Roadster Show coming up?
Yeah, we got a handful of them made. And part of the deal, and I didn't know until I was down there picking stuff up, is like, oh yeah, take this box. It's got a little mini hood contraption and stuff. So we got a little display out of it, and I'm going to have Darren's 32. there, which has
I remember that display they had at the Street Rod Nationals. They'd have that little display.
I don't know if it's the same, but we got a little one that's it's like a little mini hood kit. And then Darren's car has it on there, and with our windshield, so we'll have Darren's Roadster there.
Oh, last time I talked to you about that, you thought Darren's car was too covered up in the garage. So that's going to be the booth car. Pryor's car's not coming back this year?
No, I think we're going to bring. It was going to be, and then Darren kind of turned a corner, and he's been very helpful. He understands why it would be nice to have the Roadster there to help support the product. And his Roadster's bitching, you know, for a bare metal car, it's bitching. So Pryor's car has gotten a lot of stuff done this last year. So, and actually just this morning, Pryor and I were talking, it'd be great to bring Pryor's car back probably in a bare metal condition next year to have in the booth, because we've gotten some wheels made for it. A lot of work's been done. It might even be running by that point.
So Pryor's car has a great story, and if you know Pryor, it's the best story for the best car owner. That thing was in your booth last year. It was black and pink checkered, right?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to save that story for another round?
Let's throw that in at the end because it's Pryor.
Okay. So Pryor is a Model A guy, especially and specifically 31 Model A's. And I don't know, 10 years ago, he finds these two cars on the side of the road, not but a couple of miles from his house, with like a cardboard for sale sign on them. Like somebody literally drug them up to the road and get rid of them. And he's driving home and he sees these. And there was two 31s. One was a Vicky and the other one was an A400, which both of those cars were only made in late 31. They've got unique features to them that other Model A's don't have. And they're incredibly rare on top of it, a B400 especially. So an A400, excuse me. So this car is wild looking, as you saw. It's pink and orange checkered, and it has you can look it up on Wikipedia. It was used for advertisement at a bar. It started out in Sausalito. It was only there for a year. Then the bar was closed, and the lady that owned the bar went to Europe for a year. And then when she came back, she reopened the bar. And this is in, I think the bar opened in 51 in Sausalito, maybe 1950. Wow. And then reopened in San Francisco in like 52, maybe. And the car was used for advertisements. It was known that it was driven around and what have you. And then, the bar closed in like 58 or 9 maybe. And then the car was around for years in San Francisco
But it wasn't a normal bar.
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
It was you know, at a gas station. A lot of Model A guys, early Ford guys, knew about this car, and then it disappeared. Pryor knew about it, but it disappeared off the face of the earth, and it went into somebody's San Francisco basement garage, possibly a Model A collector, because the Vicky came out of that as well, and somehow made it from San Francisco all the way up here, which is about, you know, 65 miles roughly. I think somebody passed away, a family member got it, decided they didn't want it. And, you know, they weren't free. Like, you know, they weren't cheap, but they were fairly priced, and he bought both of them. And, you know, the whole thing with the bar is where the story is for the car. The bar was called the Tin Angel. You can look it up on the internet. There's a little quick Wikipedia thing that comes up. And mind you, think of the timeline, early 50s. It was a lesbian bar in San Francisco. And which is,
my mom would have loved this story.
dude, it is so punk rock before there was punk rock. And, you know, so as you saw last year at the Roadster Show, we had it in our booth on a hot rod chassis, still in that original paint. You know, it was painted with a brush, hand lettered, and you know, and it had the address on there and everything, and it's just so cool. I mean, if it were me, I would leave it that way and drive it. But, you know, that's the furthest thing from what Pryor ever wanted. You know, he wants it fully finished and done and painted nicely, and it's going to be blue. Blue is Pryor's color. But Jesse Greening just did some wheels for us.
Cool.
Yeah, they're really, really cool. Something really uncommon. He's got some neat stuff that he's gathered up for the project, and so it's moving along pretty good. It was going to probably be in the booth, but, you know, thankfully the Roadster's a better fit this year, being the 75th anniversary, the Roadster Show. Our product really kind of supports Roadster aspect, especially with our windshield and now the Dan Fink windshield stuff, which we're nowhere near there yet on being able to bring that back, but we have the needed pieces probably, and some of the information where the stuff was made. So we might be able to still get it made down south, but at the very least, we might be, you know, most likely be working with Scott Booth up in Canada and bringing some of those castings back and being able to offer those windshield frames as well. And
so while we're talking, one more thing, if anybody, vintage hot rod guys or vintage Model A guys, you still need some top bows for this A400, right?
Yeah, we're looking for a few of the top assembly pieces. We're able to get some stuff, but there's just some stuff that's, you know, non-existent. There's somebody out there, I'm sure, with some extra stuff. Even if, you know, good photos or borrowing parts, we can replicate it. But, you know, obviously if we can find some parts, it just makes life easier. I do want to tell a quick, cool Pryor story. A lot of the world doesn't know who Pryor is. He's just a local hot rod guy.
But if you'd seen you at the Roadster Show in SEMA, he traveled with you a lot of years. He was with you.
He's helped us out for a long time. He's you know, a good friend of mine. He's like another dad. And he's always been there to help the shop in so many different ways. And but, you know, a kid growing up, you know, read Street Rodder magazine at, you know, high school era and stuff like that. And I know you'll remember this, but, you know, they used to have a pretty good section of like model car stuff in Street Rodder and other hot rod magazines. And, you know, going way back in the 50s and 60s, building models was a big part of hot rodding, and it was always promoted because, you know, they got it. It's like if you didn't get kids interested, it's not going to keep going, right? And so I would always read, there was this guy that I would read about, and I had no idea who he was from, but he had a name you couldn't forget. It was Pryor Passerino. And he traveled all over the country with the good guys, supporting the model car program that the good guys always had. And Pryor was one of those first guys where when you saw a feature of a model car in like Street Rodder or a magazine of, you know, anytime in the 80s, and it was a model recreation of like Fat Jack's car or Boyd's car, a famous car, a recent like high profile build, but it was a model that was prior, and all that stuff had to be made from scratch. I mean, he even would hand punch little louvers in the plastic, and I mean, just retarded level of model building. I guess
I don't know if you can say that word anymore.
that's one of my favorite words, so I apologize. It's not said to offend anybody. I just love it.
You're on restriction.
But yeah, I've been to Pryor's house, and his model building area is absolutely incredible. He's got more models still than anybody I've ever seen. And he also shares the same love as me and Zane's sickness of vintage magazines. He has a bunch of those too.
He has so many ideas of stuff to do. And I think the model car thing was, as a kid, it was the outlet to, you could build a model car fast enough and put those ideas to something and cut something up and realize, oh, that doesn't work, or it works. And even to
and that
this
was
day,
a gateway to people building real hot rods. Over half of our people that we talked to, how'd you get into cars? Either I bought the magazines, my dad had a car, or I started building model cars.
And even he's now 78,
grocery store,
and he still has tons of ideas and different things to fuse this. I mean, it comes from that idea. You take this part from this car, and this is where it fits on that car, and so it's just an incredible resource of ideas and information. And for him, it's always been the outlet of model car building. But
I know I've talked to him on the phone before and talked about a 55 that I want to build, or when I was building the 36 that got stalled out. And then here you come the next month, I got a little gift in the mail of something that he built for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I've known him for 30 years and I've never gotten a model from him.
He usually gives me a little Hot Wheels of something.
Yeah.
He modifies a Hot Wheels, but like the 55, it wasn't painted because I didn't know what colors. He's like, here, you have to finish it, but he like mini tubbed it and hammered it on the ground. And yeah, I didn't get a real model. I've got a couple Hot Wheels from him.
Yeah.
Well, that was a sore subject.
Yeah, sorry for bringing that up, Zane.
Yeah, I get to hang out with him all the time, so that's better than that.
Yeah. So I think we should probably wrap this one up. The hardest person we've got to commit has been a record-breaking longest So
I have a question.
He's close to Daryl Starbird was 3 hours, so Zane's right up there with Daryl.
So I have a question. We obviously know the shows that you love and your favorite shows.
Mm-hmm.
What is a show that you haven't been to yet that's on your bucket list?
As far as going to a car show?
Yeah.
Just going to see it or what have you?
Or attending, participating, seeing it.
Man, I don't know. The current era of shows, The Gathering of the Rock, is something that I want to get to really bad, and it just circumstances haven't been able to do that one yet. Traditional shows or shows that have been going on for a long time, probably like back to the 50s, something of that nature. I haven't ever been able to get to too many shows in the Midwest or East Coast. So I'm not, I mean, there's a lot of good ones, but I know like back to the 50s has always been kind of
I always forget. I'd like to go to Let East sometime in New Jersey.
Yeah, stuff like that. I mean, I've been to so much stuff on the West Coast, and been fortunate enough to go to the West Coast events that, people all around the world dream to get to go to. And, I've been able to only go to a few Midwest shows, whether it's Detroit to just fly back to see it with my own eyes. Been fortunate enough to go and participate only a couple times at Columbus. And then we got to go to a really cool show in Minnesota. Don't mess this up. It's the GTSA show, the Gopher State Timing Association show.
Mm-hmm.
Such a bitchin' deal. I mean, I got to go. It's been a number of years.
Didn't you take the Gold Roadster there?
Yeah, so probably 20 years ago was my first time, and that was such an eye opener to me. Again, I'm brainwashed on the West Coast, but such an eye opener to how much cool history of all of this was going on in all different parts of the country at the same time it was going on here. But the magazine influence was here, and that's why in the early era it's mostly the West Coast known stuff, but they got such an incredible history, a long time span. I mean, it's almost as old as the Roadster show. Bitchin' little wintertime show, indoor venue. It was such a cool thing to be a part of it and get to, I think I got to go twice, once with the gold car, and then we went back for their 50th. And that was one of the most memorable trips I ever had. I got to travel with Mike Chase, Andy and Sue Brizio, and Cole Foster and his dad, Pat Foster.
Oh, wow.
That'd be cool.
And I knew all of them already, but to be able to spend a week traveling on an airplane, hanging out in the freezing cold and going to shows, and there's stories just from that we can talk about later, but
does that mean he's going to do this again?
Yeah, he is. He said it 2 or 3 times.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Fun.
That's an event I'd actually love to go back to. Such cool people. They love their history. Kind of the same passion I have for the Roadster show. And, I didn't start participating in the Roadster show until the late 80s. So it was already going on for 38 years before I ever got there. But, its history is really important to me. And
so like many of our other guests that we've had on here, you live, eat, breathe cars 24/7.
Yeah.
So what is something non-automotive that you have on your bucket list?
So I know you guys have been to Hawaii a few times. We've never been to Hawaii. We're supposed to go to Costa Rica.
Zane.
Get your passports. Steph, if you're listening to this, get his passports.
And maybe not necessarily non-automotive, but something like maybe no car showy. Is there what else? What's on your bucket list?
I don't know.
I know one thing. I know one.
What's that?
I want to throw Carrie into a volcano, but she's not a virgin.
The Indy 500.
I took him to the Indy 500.
Oh yeah, that's right. Steph didn't get to go.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Indy either. I mean, that was a great trip, and definitely want to do that again.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, if everything seems to revolve around that, I would love to see more of the country in a hot rod. And you hear about, and there's the good guys do great trips. Their Hall of Fame
FM3
tours.
does good trips.
Yeah, there's so many of that things going on in little pockets and regions, but to hear the stories about Andy and those guys when they used to drive from California to the Nationals and stuff, kind of doing that on a more small group, intimate group of friends, and seeing parts of the country is something I want to do really badly. Hopefully I'll get that opportunity.
You've done the Deuce Days in Victoria before, right?
Yeah, when we built the Bare Metal 27, the Shadow Rods body, that was a me and Pryor project. I didn't get to drive on the Good Guys trip to Indy with Andy and all those guys that year. Pryor and Mike Chase took the car. I flew out for the event, and the biggest reason is just my kids were at an age I couldn't be gone that long. And also the following weekend,
because they were probably on restriction,
where I was. The following weekend, they drove from California to Indy, but then they came right back for Father's Day LA Roadster show. And at that time, I participated more at that event. I think I still had the gold car, and I was taking all that stuff down there. So I flew out to Indy and then got back home to few days later have to drive and haul down to the Father's Day show. But the following year, Pryor and I drove it to Canada for Deuce Days, and that was just an incredible trip.
Is that the year did we run into you when we were up there for the BMX World Championships?
Yeah. Wasn't that like an Olympic trial thing or something?
No, it was the Worlds. Carrie raced. It was 07.
We were both in Victoria at the same time for 2 different reasons. Yeah. And then we met up, had pancakes, and we drove home.
Okay, we do have to wrap this up now. This may be a 2-parter.
Yeah, but we're gonna we need to get it up. That's why we did it, so it goes up.
You don't talk about getting it up. I'll take care of getting it up. We're talking about the podcast, boys. Get your minds out of the gutter.
So we want to thank Zane Cullen, finally, for being a guest on the Strange Motion Way podcast and from Cotati Speed Shop. Tell everybody where they can find you online, on social media, your website, how they order products, all that happy stuff.
Probably the easiest way would just be message us on Instagram or Facebook, Cotati Speed Shop. Website's under construction currently, so some kind of direct message is always the best way.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, Zane.
We'll see you at the Roadster Show.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, welders, ready to upgrade your gear and save some serious dough in the process? The Miller Build with Blue Savings and Rebate Program has you covered. Find amazing deals and cashback rebates on a wide range of Miller products, from welders to plasma cutters and everything in between, all backed by our 3-year warranty. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. Take advantage of the Miller Build with Blue program now. Visit us online or stop by your nearest Miller distributor today to start saving.